Right. Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Dhrupad, and right now we're just going to get started with the United Nations Security Council webinar for ILMUNC India. So, to give you like a brief overview of what the committee, we're going to work the committee on two big agenda topics. The two topics that we have selected this year are really interesting. They're also going to be the topics which are going to be used at the actual ILMUNC, which is going to be held in Philadelphia in January. So, and they're definitely topics that I haven't seen being used in the Security Council. So I'm definitely excited to see how you guys, work with that. So the first topic that we're going to be using is the topic about intervention in sensitive geopolitical environments. So that, let's go with Ukraine, let's go with Syria, these kind of countries, and how the Security Council has sort of become the committee that is being used to legitimize action by individual players in these countries. And the idea is that can we kind of come up with a resolution or come up with ideas which can help mitigate this problem, which can actually encourage countries to work together in the Security Council and not necessarily use their position as permanent members or members with veto power to actually be able to maneuver for their own personal gains and not so much for the improving the situation, which they're sort of using as a scapegoat to go in there and try and win a strategic advantage over some other nation or some other global power. So the idea behind that is to sort of kind of look and see that can you guys come up with a framework or come up with new regulations which all countries must abide by before going in and taking military action, which even countries like the big countries like the United States, Russia, France, the United Kingdom, they all need to abide by, so that none of them are making unilateral actions which can be perceived as a hindrance to the overall objective of the global community and the objective of the Security Council to basically ratify and preserve the integrity of the UN Charter. So that was topic A. Then topic B is, I think, one which, especially delegates from India, I think would feel is definitely an interesting topic to talk about. This debate has been going on for a while. That is the United Nations Security Council outdated? Is the Security Council currently not a committee that well encompasses the the geopolitical climate? Does it actually not have all the major players at the table, and therefore it's losing its sharpness, it's losing its effectiveness, and it can no longer function as a committee which is really has the power or the capability to do what it was originally mandated for? And therefore it comes back to the argument that if that is not the case, if the Security Council is truly losing its effectiveness, then what can be done to improve the effectiveness of the Security Council and make it again a committee which will function well and which will have all the major players at the table? So, we were the objective of topic B is to really drill down and see how we can improve the Security Council by actually changing the very structure of the Security Council. So when I say changing the structure, no, that doesn't mean you have to necessarily get rid of the permanent members or get rid of the temporary members or things like that. But the most important thing would be that changing the membership. Is the current membership of 5 permanent members and those members, is that very restrictive? Is that perfectly not aligned with the global political scenario at this time? Like, there's been a lot of debate that France is a permanent member right now, but France really shouldn't be because they no longer have that geopolitical standing that they once did, especially when the Security Council was originally formed. As opposed to France, then you have Germany, which is a far more dominant player in the European Union. It's an economic as well as a military superpower. It is more becoming the strategic ally of the United Kingdom more than France is, because France sort of just tags along with whatever they're doing. And therefore, a lot of people are arguing that if France should have a seat, so should Germany. And more not even going to Germany, let's go back closer to home. A lot of debate has been going around that India should definitely have a seat at the UN Security Council. And if you were to like break this topic down, if you were to look at it from a military standpoint, India is effectively becoming a blue water navy. We're a nuclear empowered country. They have the second largest standing army in the world. India is definitely a country which is has the military might to really warrant the kind of influence that is required to get a seat at the table. So a lot of people might argue that India should definitely have a seat at the table, and not only because of its military capabilities, but also because India heavily contributes to the UN. They do have troops going to almost each and every large UN peacekeeping deployment. India also is a contributor in terms of aid to the UN, supplies to the UN. Additionally, India has policy positions which are not necessarily ambivalent. India's opinions and India's policies do matter because India acts as a very effective proxy between the United States and Russia. And given the recent tensions between these two countries, and given India's relatively friendly relations with both of them, it is important that India sort of come there to occasionally mediate situations. We are no strangers to the situations that have happened recently in the Security Council where the United States and Russia have sort of been at loggerheads with each other because they're ideologically different, and a lot may argue that Putin's an interesting character. But that being said, it is important, I feel, for the stability of the world, especially when you're talking about the table with the biggest powers there, not to have a country like India or Germany. And we look at two other countries. I don't want to go into the depths of each one of them, but we also do look at countries like, especially the G5. So we're looking at, should Japan be there? Should Brazil or South Africa be there? So these are sort of the countries that it's definitely important to look at and see whether these countries should be on the Security Council. And then the next objective that delegates need to figure out is, all right, if we admit these countries, what happens to the voting dynamic? Because right now, the P5 has a veto power, so they can shoot down any resolution that they don't want, but they don't necessarily need to support it for a resolution to be passed. On the other hand, if you add 5 permanent members to the existing 5, you have 10 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members, which is sort of a dichotomy of power which is disparate. So do you want to increase the membership size of the non-permanent members? Then the question arises, to how much? What would be an adequate number to fully represent those countries who don't have an immediate stake in the current geopolitical environment, but yet their say is important to maintain the stability and the autonomy of the Security Council as an effective body charged with the preservation of the UN Charter. So it is important to then look at what these countries. Then is the geographic split for these countries going to be even? Are they all going to be distributed among the 5 continents? Is it going to be more heavy to one continent from the other? And these are a lot of issues which then get on. And then the next big issue that you will have to look at is voting. Is the veto an outdated and antiquated system? Should the veto not exist? Or is the veto giving someone too much power? In that case, should the veto go to someone else? Should some other the countries have veto, let's say, in tandem. So if 2 permanent members choose to shoot down a resolution, it only does then the veto count. So no one can act unilaterally. Someone needs to have an ally on the permanent body representation for the veto to work. Or a veto plus a large chunk of the non-permanent members, what that chunk will be. So all these things will be very interesting to see how delegates can come up with an effective solution for revamping the Security Council, because it's really important at this time to understand that the Security Council is a body which is getting outdated, which is losing its effectiveness, and in most cases it's just being used as a scapegoat to legitimize action by countries such as the United States or Russia. So it'll be interesting to see how delegates tackle this problem. So I guess the next thing, there's some recent pertinent issues that we might as well talk about. So, in terms of this topic, in terms of the revamp of the Security Council, the G5 actually did have a meeting on the sidelines of the first session of the UN General Assembly in New York last month. So, it'll be very interesting for delegates to try and go in and see what the minutes of those meetings was discussed, what is their objectives moving forward. Because the curious thing is that at this point of time, Brazil, beg your pardon, is not a country which is in the most stable situation. Brazil does have a lot of issues, domestic issues, economic issues. So it will be important to see whether Brazil is still being considered a part of the G5, or is are the countries like Japan, Germany, and India thinking of looking at other members who might have a more impactful you know impactful impact on the global political environment. So this is an interesting thing to see how this would work moving forward, and you know kind of look at what the situation is to make sure that the countries are all working together. Because if you look at it in for the countries that are looking to break into the Security Council, all of them are are vehemently opposed to any single one of them breaking into the Security Council. All of them have very clearly said that it will be all of us or none of us. So that again, it begs the question that in that case is sort of like the expansion of the Security Council any stymied from the start? Is it sort of jinxed because there's no way that the permanent members are going to allow to have all five of these members come in? Maybe they have different views on different people. And that can be true, because if you think about it, Germany is one of the countries which is definitely wants to come in and has a lot of support from a number of sorry, the G4 nations. I beg your pardon. So they have a lot of support from let's say the United Kingdom as well as France. But on the other hand, Italy is one of the nations which has vehemently opposed the entrance of Germany into the Security Council, based on the simple fact that they feel that that would involve a heavy polarization in Europe, and Italy will no longer have a say in how the politics of Europe are conducted. So this will be another interesting thing to see. That do you feel that opposition from current members of the European Union is actually going to hinder Germany's chances, or the fact that they have two members of the EU on the Security Council already there to kind of support them, will that kind of move their cause forward? The next thing, I mean, with India, although the situation is less dominant, with India, definitely the biggest opposition is Pakistan. They do have a they feel that this would give an unfair advantage to India in the South Asian region, and they feel that India will then become more dominant and will be less willing to negotiate with Pakistan, and especially on the Kashmir issue. They will feel that India would sort of like pull rank or use force when required, because now they have the standing at the Security Council where they could effectively veto things. So then the next thing that you'll have to look at is that under what circumstances, if any, would Pakistan or Italy allow these two countries to come in? And that would sort of involve, talking to potentially people outside the committee or getting external information, because not these members are all present at the table at this time. The next thing is, and a big thing will be for the delegates of China, because we know that China and India have sort of a strange relationship which has its ups and downs. But is China comfortable enough with India to put it on the Security Council as a permanent member? That's a good question to be asked. Does China just put up a front where it's like, all right, we're friends with India, we'll improve trade ties, but there are the issues, in the north of India as well as in Arunachal Pradesh, where China is constantly saying that this is Chinese sovereign land. Aside from that, there's also the issue of Tibet, where India is supporting Tibet and the autonomy of Tibet, whereas China strongly believes that Tibet is a part of the Republic of China. So there there's some things that these small nuances which will become very important in the committee, because at this time, once a resolution goes forward, there's no turning back. So for delegates especially, while collaborative action is definitely going to be one of the big themes of the committee, you need to understand that sticking to your policy position as from a country's point of view is going to be crucial to make sure that this committee runs effectively and actually has viable solutions. Because in a committee where the Chinese delegates do not have any opinion on whether or not India should join the Security Council is not going to be representative of the Security Council at all. And the idea about this committee is sort of to get down to the issue as closely as possible and drill down and see what is required to actually make progress in this particular field. So, and then, to talk about a little more in terms of, the military intervention. This is, I mean, none of you are strangers to this issue. Issue has been since the Arab Spring. This has sort of been a big issue. I mean, not even talking about Afghanistan and Iraq, which were, about over 10 years ago, but since the Arab Spring, the West has sort of taken a very biased approach on which regimes to support and which regimes to topple. And if you look at it, the West has sort of gone ahead and ignored Syria for a long time because they feel that Russia is involved. They feel that Syria is not a country they want to get involved in right now. But when it came to, let's say, Egypt, or when it came to Libya, they were quick to react and they were quick to put down people who they not necessarily had the best of relations with. So is it a question of the West just not being proactive because they don't have the bandwidth to involve themselves in a third country? Or is it just that there is a more underlying issue that the West has decided to use a soft touch while dealing with Syria, whereas with Libya and with Egypt, they were a lot more firm and a lot more direct and to the point, despite arguably Syria being as gross a human rights atrocity as any of these other two instances. So that'll be one reason it'll be interesting to kind of see, because these are the committee positions or like the international positions that are not publicized. These are sort of like reading between the lines is going to be very important here, seeing what news articles saying, seeing what statements saying, reading one of the, whenever I have had to represent a delegate from the United States in any committee, one thing that I use very heavily is actually reading press releases from the White House. And the reason why that is true is because these releases usually have a lot of information that are not very obvious, but they're trying to imply very heavily a policy position, which more often than not is sort of contrary to what the government is actually trying to do, because they do not want to make it evident that this is sort of their policy position moving forward. So sometimes just like going through these documents and trying to see what the message is they're trying to convey is a very useful thing, because then you can try and see if this was the message they were actually trying to convey, then this is sort of the thing that sort of happened and they're trying to brush it under the rug for whatever reason. Or it might just be a case that's actually the message trying to convey, but if you think about it intelligently, not any intelligent international player is going to put all their cards on the table, especially in a public press release. So it's going to be interesting to kind of drill down on those issues and see how you can read between the lines to kind of glean more insight and information than is sort of just publicly available at that given point of time. All right, so now I think I want to shift the talk a little bit from what the topics are, to a little more on parliamentary procedure. So, I got a couple of questions that is this going to be a crisis committee, like a lot of Security Council committees in the United States? So, personally, as an Indian delegate, I did Mal UN in India, and I was one of the biggest fans of a vanilla resolution based Security Council. And I think a big problem that has happened in Model UN off late is that with the growth of crisis committees, and because crisis committees are potentially more fun, a lot of Model UN has detracted from the truth. we've sort of started spending a lot of time coming up with fake solutions to fake problems and then feeling happy about ourselves. But none of these solutions are potentially even necessarily viable, nor do these solutions really represent true diplomacy and like team building, because crisis is sometimes so fast paced that you just spend you're not even looking at the solution. You just want to put one out there so that you can deal with the next problem. And I think therefore this committee is going to be a very much vanilla GA style Security Council committee. We will potentially have a crisis element where, for half a session something happens and delegates are asked to, react and come up with a viable solution in time. We're going to try and make sure that this crisis is interesting and is pertinent to the topics being discussed. But overall, the objective of this committee is going to be very much like a regular Security Council committee. It will not have a crisis element, and the objective will be to discuss these topics, discuss the various aspects of these topics, and drill down to build, passing a resolution at the end of the 3 days of debate after going through various drafts of working papers and clauses and, building blocks as and when may be necessary. That being said, one thing that we will be looking to do is, because some of the important players in this committee are not actually at this table, we will be using the dais to sort of answer questions if you may have about, positions of some countries, or whether you have specific information. Because although this is being simulated today, let's say, some things happen and we want to add an element of uncertainty into this, then we can always simulate a particular country's position externally. And that is where you can send up notes to the chair, and the dais will be responding to them appropriately so that you have an idea of what's happening in the external world, especially when it comes to the countries like, let's say India or Japan, which are not represented on the Security Council at this time. It'll be important to see how they respond to certain actions being taken by this body, because they directly affect what the influence of these countries and what influence they're going to have moving forward. So that is generally in terms of parliamentary procedure. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure I don't need to go over the actual nitty-gritty details of ParliPro. I'm sure you guys are all comfortable with that. And if not, we will have training sessions before the conference where you can go over parliamentary procedure. And we do have a lot of resources to kind of teach you parliamentary procedure and like go over the basics and the format of parliamentary procedure that we are using. So definitely look at ILMUNC-India.com, where all the information is there, and you can sort of try and see if you can get your questions answered. So that should not be too much trouble. As always, you can feel free to reach out to me at unsc@ilmunc-india.com for any questions that you may have on parliamentary procedure, or any questions in general that you may have about the committee. All right, so the next thing that we're going to be doing is briefly going over position papers. So position paper deadline is November 20th. I realize that doesn't give you guys too much time, but the idea about the position papers is not to really outline and flesh out every small detail about your position or your country's position, is to more give you an understanding of what kind of mindset and what kind of objectives are you going in to this committee session with. So the position paper deadline is on November 20th. For delegates who are a part of a school delegation, you can have your faculty advisors upload the position paper system into our ILMUNC India website. We will have a portal set up so you can directly submit the position papers to them, and they will then upload it for you. For individual delegates, you do have access to our portal, so you should be able to log in and actually upload the position papers there. So that should not be an issue. Again, if you do have an issue, you can reach out to the secretariat, or you can again reach out to me personally, and if there's some problem, you can either email it to me, or we'll figure some way out to make sure that your position paper is accounted for. In terms of the actual position papers, we're not going to be doing something very complicated. The position papers I'm looking for is one position paper for both topics. Ideally, the position paper should not be more than 1 page long, but it can go to about 1.5 page, 12 font, that should be about fine. Double space shouldn't be too much of an issue. The idea is not to go very much in depth about the topic, but more to give an overall understanding of what your position is with respect to these topics, and try and stick to those. Try and have those positions be as close to that of your actual nation, so that you are. The committee simulation is as realistic as possible. In most cases, we will not do a award for the best position paper, but the position paper will be used by us to get an idea of how much delegates moved from their position, because we don't want someone to stick to their guns necessarily the entire committee session, then nothing will be achieved. But we don't want someone, let's say Pakistan, to suddenly say, okay, it's absolutely cool for India to join the Security Council, because that will be a gross violation from the current national policy of the country, unless they're given some major reassurances or some major developments have happened which has changed their position. So the position papers will sort of be used to see how much you deviated, and was that deviation something sensible? Did that make sense? Did that help move forward the overall objective of the committee, or was that something random? And random deviations are definitely not going to be encouraged, because we want delegates to be as true to their positions as possible, and to actually have constructive debates as true delegates of that country, not just people sitting in a room discussing a topic. So it's imperative that you actually embody a member of the nation that you're representing, and truly put forth points and ideas that your nation's government would be fully comfortable supporting, and not just ideas that you might think are sensible. While the latter are also important, you have to remember that you're a representative of your government first, and after that a delegate second. So position papers should not be too much work. Again, 1 to 1.5 page, 12 font, double spaced, should not be too much of an issue. Just mention your position, mention your name, otherwise, and you can either, if you're a school delegation, give it to your faculty advisor. If you're an individual, just upload it to the back end directly. Right. So we do have a Q&A system set up. I believe that there is a link and instructions on the actual ILMUNC India webinar webpage. So if you guys want to start asking questions, that would be great. You know, you should start asking the questions now, and we would I'll go ahead and actually try and see how many that I can answer in this at this time. So I have gotten one question about whether the position papers is for both agendas, and yes, the position paper is going to be for both agendas, but you don't need two position papers. You just need one position paper, not two. That's about it. Okay, so I think general tips in terms, I think I've gone over this, but I will definitely go over these again. General tips, as I said in my interview, I think collaborative team building efforts and collaborative diplomacy is a skill that has slowly trickled out of Model UN, and I think it is one of the most vital skills in terms of moving forward in not only as a Model UN delegate, but just in life. If you are able to bring a group of people together, and if you are able to see eye to eye with them, and if you're able to make concessions if necessary, but still, kind of reach an objective or come up with something constructive, that is extremely, extremely useful. And this is something that happens everywhere around the world a lot of times. So it is absolutely crucial that that is one of the mindsets that you come in with. This committee is not a committee about who is going to sort of create problems for another person. This committee is truly to try and see if you can further your country's policy, and how you do that using the other members in that committee, and how you get them to see eye to eye with what your thoughts are and what your objectives are. And that is really going to be one of the major challenges that delegates are going to have to face getting into this committee, because it's going to be one of the things that we're definitely going to be looking for. The second thing, of course, none of you are strangers to this. A clear, concise debate is going to be something that is very, very favorable in a committee. I have always thought that the best delegates are the ones who are able to, yielding your time is not a bad thing. But if you do it once you've finished all your points and once you've gone ahead and said what you have to. But don't ramble. Again, people who ramble just are sort of taking up the time because they're afraid of questions. And I'm a person who always yields my time to questions because I feel that allows me to gauge the temperature of the room and to figure out how people are feeling about what I've said. Do they think it's contentious? Do they think something I've said does not make sense? And it is an excellent way to kind of figure out whether, who is sort of on my side, who is not, who is sort of on the fence, and it gives you an excellent way to, understand which members could potentially form your block moving forward. So again, this is not saying that you should yield to questions. You can yield your time to the chair. You can yield your time to another delegate. That's completely fine. But this is just something that I enjoy doing, and so yeah, I just thought I'd share my experiences with you. The second thing is, and I touched upon this before, definitely make sure that before you give a speech, you sort of have your bullet points jot down. A good delegate will never read off paper because that will always be, you will sort of stutter and you will sort of kind of have to like adapt your speech as you gauge the temperature of the room, as you gauge reactions based on what you're saying. But you should definitely have concrete bullet points so that you don't say three of them and then you just ramble on because you want to kill time. Definitely have bullet points set up before your speech so you're making an argument and you're making a concise argument. And definitely try and add to the debate. Don't just go ahead and say that, I echo this delegate's sentiment. I fully support this delegate. I think that is very good, and that will definitely help give people an idea who their allies are within this committee in terms of like ideological positions, and definitely do that. But don't just go ahead and repeat what that previous delegate said. Definitely add on to something. If you would like to show your support for a delegate, do that outside. And you do not have necessarily anything to add, send them a message or talk to them during an unmoderated caucus, and that would be an excellent way to do that without actually disrupting from the flow of debate. Aside from that, we will be looking at forming working papers. In general, try and avoid leaving committee room as much as possible because it will be it'll be important that debate is structured and everyone is present for debate. We will have a lot of time between sessions where you guys can leave the committee room and work on position papers as well. Work on working papers as well as working on the final resolution. Right. So I'm just gonna go to another couple of questions that have been coming up. So I think the question is, will bringing up controversial stuff in committee be looked down on? And no, absolutely not. This is a fantastic question. If you want to point at Russia and tell them that they had no business bombing Syria, go for it. Because as a delegate of the, let's say the delegate of the United States did that, and that is completely fine because the United States has very publicly condemned Russia for involving itself in Syria in a sensitive political climate, which anyway has too many players involved already. So this is not something that is a problem. And in fact, it's the controversial topics which make for some of the most constructive and substantive debate because it really gives you a core problem to solve. It gives you a problem that is not just a vacuous problem where you just write up a few clauses and say, seeing the human atrocities created, we do this, we do that, blah, 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 blah. It drills down to the issue. It actually sees that, can I get this point across? Can I get this working paper across despite it being against someone's, permanent member's will? And that will really be make for debate, which can occasionally get heated, and I recommend you don't do that. Definitely try and be as cool and calm as possible during committee, but it'll definitely make for debate which is very exciting, which is fast-paced, and which is contentious. The worst kind of moderated caucuses are where everyone agrees because then there's no point in discussing it. the best moderated caucuses are ones where there are two or more positions and people are trying to win others to their side. And that will be the kind of debate that hopefully these contentious topics will bring up. So definitely feel free to bring up contentious topics. That's something I will definitely encourage. But as this committee does not have a crisis angle to it, you will not be able to be doing scheming in the back. So the crisis or like the chair will serve as a sounding board for information if you will need be. But as far as the committee concerned, it is going to be a vanilla Security Council committee. All right. So another question I get is, are we allowed to yield to questions after moderate caucus speech as well, or just after general speakers list speeches? No, because it will be a, GA committee, GA style committee. You will be allowed. To yield questions only after GSL speeches. After, if you have in moderated caucuses, you can use up your time, but any remaining time will automatically be yielded to the chair. If anyone feels that this is not a policy that you guys should follow, this is something we can discuss on Thursday of committee before we actually get started. But this is sort of the policy that we follow at all our conference that we do it in the U.S., and this is sort of what I was intending to follow moving forward. So the other, and this is a fantastic question, will a committee not reaching a consensus be shunned? Absolutely not. The whole point is that I want this to be a realistic simulation because it will be a simulation where you delegates are understanding and kind of embodying delegates of these actual nations and trying to see what are the challenges they face when they're walking into the Security Council to try and solve these issues. And we have been sitting here for years and years, and a lot of these issues have not been solved. So if you are not able to reach a consensus, that is totally okay. But the idea is that you should not just spend the entire time arguing on a topic to death. Once there has been constructive argument and debate over a topic, you should then move forward to see can you actually build resolutions which can be put to the floor. Now maybe the resolutions don't get the majority vote because there are some players who just choose to abstain on both, and that is totally fine, but it is important that you do try and come up with some policy and some kind of legislation which you actually put forward, because that will show that the committee has actually moved in some direction and they have some concrete ideas which they feel or that block feels will benefit how the committee moves forward. All right. So I can't find, so there, and guys, the live questions are great. Definitely send more live questions. These are definitely, this is kind of what I'm here for, to understand, kind of explain my ideas and my thinking for you. Right. So other than that, there's not really much to discuss at this time. I think moving forward, if I had to give you tips in terms of what I would be looking to research, I would definitely be looking at, concrete sources. So definitely use good sources. In terms of, like, I know factual accuracy is going to be important in this committee, and that is absolutely something that I will also be looking for. But do not, I don't really look very favorably upon constantly calling points of order just to kind of get your, kind of push it into someone's face that you said something wrong, unless the point is extremely factually incorrect and it completely violates the basis of a person's speech. I would refrain from using points of order. If you feel there is a factual inaccuracy that has happened, you can send up a note to me, and I will take my discretion on whether or not to send it out to make it that public based on how relevant it is to the debate going on at that time. Otherwise, good sources, definitely the BBC, Reuters. Any of these, Al Jazeera, the big news sources are definitely going to be very great. If you're looking for, financial information, which is probably not going to be extremely relevant, but might be, you can use, again, you can use sources like Bloomberg, Yahoo Finance, etc., for that kind of information. Definitely, you can also, use sources, American newspapers, that are also accepted, such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc. These will also be accepted. So you can just look at any big major news article, and of course, there's a list of sources on the website that you can use. But the UN itself, CIA Factbook, Amnesty International, any of these sources will definitely be viable sources to use. Also, like government websites. So, the government of the United States, the government of India, military, anything that you can find that is government ratified will also be okay. Um, Right. So we have a couple more questions that have come up. Will presidential statements be allowed? So the idea behind presidential statements is generally, unless there has been a big development, we will not really look at presidential statements. The idea is that as a delegate of that country, you will be tasked with putting forward their foreign policy positions and their policy positions with respect to these topics. Now, during that brief crisis, if something does happen that mandates a presidential statement, I will use my discretion to allow the delegate to do so. But these will most probably be rare. So I would not really be looking at having too many presidential statements, but I'm not completely ruling out the possibility that they will happen. Um, the so Okay, so the second thing is, will I frown upon a veto? Absolutely not. Again, realism is going to be one of the biggest things that I use to judge the quality of this committee. If I feel that this committee is digressing from something that didn't actually happen, or will not is not likely to happen just because it is off policy for so many countries, I will think the committee has sort of gone astray, and I will try and push you guys back to something which is more concrete. So again, if I said that tomorrow the United States wants to put in a resolution in the Security Council condemning Russian action in Syria, if the Russian delegate should almost most definitely veto that, because that is not something that Russia will support under any circumstances, and it is definitely something that vetoing will be seen as something sticking to your foreign policy position. So vetoes are not a bad thing. I just Again, but they're a very powerful tool. So what I would say is delegates should definitely respect the power of the veto and definitely use it where it is where it is useful and where it is critical, but not abuse the power of the veto. And similarly, more generally speaking, not when it comes to Mali UN, a lot of delegates abuse procedure to sort of get their voice heard, and I would really discourage that. I feel this is a constructive committee dealing with very contentious topics, and the idea is to come out with substantive debate which will actually move these ideas forward and give you a better understanding of what's happening in the world. This is not a shouting match where you can use, a fact book from some corner of the delegate guide to try and get your voice heard over someone else. If you have a point to make, I assure you it's not a very big committee. Everyone will be, I will try and make calling on as equitable as possible. And if you ever have concerns, please feel free to come up to me. I am one of those delegates who goes up to a chair if I say that, hey, I'm not being called on enough. Hey, I have this point to say. Always write a note. We will be constantly be looking at notes and constantly trying to communicate with the delegates other than through regular debate. Okay, so will actively preventing the committee from taking action through a diplomatic way be looked down upon? So it really depends on what taking action is. In this case, this question sort of has the same flavor as the previous question about the veto. So I would say no. You can go ahead and use your diplomatic powers and your diplomatic influence to prevent the committee from taking action should that action be something that is detrimental to your country and your country's position. So again, let's go back to the same example of the United States introduces a resolution condemning Russian action in Syria. If the Russian delegate does not feel he wants to use a veto, but doesn't even want to get this, resolution introduced, he can try and go ahead and try and sway countries from abstaining or voting against introducing this resolution. So that is another way to just do it diplomatically, and that will not at all be frowned upon. I'm going to repeat again, and for sticking to your position and being as realistic as possible are two big things that I'm going to be looking for very heavily in this committee, and definitely I'll be looking forward to seeing who manages to really use that and leverage that, and then make for constructive debate over these 3 days. The other question was about the agenda topics. Note the agenda topic 1 and agenda topic 2 are sort of arbitrary. We will vote in the beginning on which agenda topic will be discussed. We will open with a speakers list where speakers can talk either about agenda topic 1 or agenda topic 2. Then we will have a brief vote once enough, 4 or 5 or 6 speakers have gone, and then we will pick one topic. If we have we will first try and pass a resolution on that topic and then have time move forward to a resolution on another topic. All right, so I guess we're sort of running out of time. We can probably take 3 or 4 more questions. Um, how many members of the executive board will be in this committee? I believe it'll be just 2 members, so it'll be myself and the AD. We might have a third member of staff come in and sit from time to time if required, or if there are a lot of notes and we haven't been able to answer them. But at this time, there are just going to be 2 members, and I don't think we will need more than that. But we will sort of play it by the ear and see how that works out. But I've been in security councils with 2 members, and that's been perfectly fine. So that's not going to be too much of an issue. All right. So just a quick recap of some major bullet points that I just want to go over. Position papers on November 20th. For schools, give it to your faculty advisor. For individuals, upload them directly. You have to talk about both topics, but it's only one position paper. 1 to 1.5 pages, 12 font, double spaced, not too complicated. Parley Pro, it's going to be a vanilla Security Council committee. It's not going to have this crisis element, so definitely be ready on your Parley Pro, ready with GSL speeches. Definitely come equipped with facts, and be ready to come out of this committee with having participated in forming a resolution of some kind. All right. Then I believe there is one more question. In your opinion, what is the optimum number of clauses in the Security Council resolution? Again, there is no optimal. Just don't have a 40-page document on the docket, because no one's going to get through that. But the idea is that you should have enough clauses to well address the issue that you've discussed and to well cover all the points that you feel are pertinent to sort of make headway on this issue. So I sort of completely leave that to the delegates' judgment of how many points they want. This is something that I will not be mandating, but definitely make it comprehensive, but don't just make it a document which has a lot of legalese going on forever. All right. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna wrap up now. Thanks so much for you guys for tuning in. So this webinar is gonna be recorded, so anyone who couldn't join us today can definitely go back and watch this. So if you have friends or your co-delegates who you feel this would be useful, this webinar will be available, and you can have them come and watch this. Again, my email ID is unsc@ilmunc-india.com. Please feel free to send me emails. The more questions I get, the better it is, because then I can give you the ideas of what I'm thinking, and I get a better idea of how you guys are thinking, and that'll really make we will all be on the same page on Thursday evening. So definitely send questions. Yeah, and again, do your research. This is going to be a research-heavy committee, but it's also going to be a very dynamic committee, so definitely be on top of what's happening in the world right now. It is going to be very important moving forward, and again, if you have any other questions in terms of logistics, definitely feel free to reach out to the Secretariat, let them know, and they will be happy to help you. And yeah, so thanks so much for tuning in. It was great talking to you guys. A lot of awesome questions, and I'm really excited to meet everyone in the next couple of weeks in India. All right? Okay, cheers. Bye.